what makes coffee exciting for me is every time you open a new door, there's 5 more doors, and behind those doors is 5 more doors, and it just doesn't stop. No matter the further you want to take coffee, the more that coffee has to offer. And so some of those things, just to start with, are the coffee trees themselves. So each tree or each variety of coffee tree has a unique profile, and that profile is exhibited in the characteristics that are put or instilled into the cherry. And it's things like aroma, acidity, the flavor quality. And so what you start to see is these trees are taken from where they're naturally grown, and then they're taken to other countries. And so you start to get these flavor combinations of these unique profiles that the tree has to offer with the unique flavor profile that a country has to offer. And then they mix together to create these extremely unique and beautiful profiles. And so that's just one part, and you can take that journey down varietals and variety, and it just keeps opening more and more doors. The other one is the way that the coffee is processed. So after they pick the cherries off the tree, processing is what happens to the cherry before it gets dried. And so there's 3, I guess, main processing methods, which is wash process, honey process, and natural process. So natural process is they pull the coffee cherry off the tree, and then they start drying it straight away, and it just turns into like a big sultana or a big date. And then they dry that coffee over an extended period of time, and then after that, then they get rid of the shell and you're left with the bean. So that's natural. Wash process is where they take the skin and the flesh off, or the fruit off the cherry, and then what they'll do is they'll put it in a fermentation tank, and they'll ferment it either with water or without water, and they'll do this over a period of time. And what the fermentation does is it gets rid of any remaining fruit, and then after they've finished processing that way, then they'll take it to be dried. And then honey, they just take the skin off, and then they'll set it out to dry. But honey's a unique process where they have generally 4 colors. So there's white honey, yellow honey, red honey, and black honey. And so if you talk to 10 people, they'll tell you 10 different ways that they assess whether it's white, yellow, or red. But the one that we talk about is when they pull the skin off and they start drying the coffee's going to dry a different color. So it can go really, really dark and have like bits of black. It can be gold. It can be quite light and white. And so the darker the coffee dries, that's going to tell you which color it's going to be. So if it dries really dark, it'll be black honey. And if it dries really light, it'll be white honey. And then obviously you have yellow and red in the middle. And generally that just talks about how much fruit or how rich is the coffee going to be. And so if you've got natural over here, that's super fruity, heavy bodied. The next one is black honey, and then you go down and you have white honey, and then you've got washed coffee, which is not extremely, but usually more acidic and have citrus flavors, quite clean. And so you've got washed over here on one side, and you've got natural, and then the honey sort of fills the spectrum in between. As the industry's progressed over the last 5 or 6 years, there's a lot of fermentation, the way that the farmers are extracting more and more flavor from their coffee. There's this exciting development around the whole world around how do farmers get more money for their coffee, and processing's contributing in such a large way. And so right now you've got different processes like carbonic maceration, anaerobic fermentation, aerobic fermentation, thick stack or supernatural. And so you've got all these different elements coming together to bring more flavor to everybody's cups of coffee. Just an example, if we talk about our thick stack naturals or supernaturals, is usually when they dry the coffee, they'll dry it maybe 1 to 2 cherries high. So like just a really thin layer to make sure that they get an even and consistent drying. But if we talk about supernaturals or thick stack, that layer goes from 1 or 2 to 4, 5 or 6 high, so it's quite thick. So the top layer dries, the bottom layer dries, but in the middle, the coffee's still fermenting and creating all this flavor. And so those thick stacks are giving us more intensity, more fruitiness, more richness. And so these are just a few ways that farmers are sort of looking to get more and more out of their coffee. So fermentation is just going nuts at the moment. I think the more the farmers, the more knowledge and skill they develop around processing, the better quality their coffee is going to be. And so I think that communication from the roaster back to the farmer, there's a lot more of that these days. And so it's helping them. Now they're starting to understand what do the buyers want to buy? What does Australian roasters want to buy? What do Japanese roasters want to buy? And so every part of the world is different. And so they're starting to understand what coffees suit certain market. So that's like talking about the green side of things, what's exciting, but also roasting and the way people are approaching roasting. So I think coffee has a history of certain things has to be done a certain way, but there's so many young people and so much excitement around pushing the boundaries of coffee. And in roasting, it's how do you approach each coffee differently. And I think like similar to extraction with having fast and slow extraction, same with roasting. People are roasting really fast, people are roasting slow, people are using like little, when they're competing at competition, they've got little air roasters that can only roast 40 grams or 100 grams at a time. And all these coffees are competing at the highest level. So I think roasting is just on this trajectory where you don't have to have 10 years experience. People are getting really good results and it's their first try. And it's because the knowledge and I guess the amount of technology going into it's just getting more and more, and it's helping people deliver great results. But that's on a small scale. But when you get to the bigger scale, that's when you need that depth of knowledge and skill. And I guess the other thing that that has really sort of taken up in the last little while has been to recipe or not to use a recipe. I think most roasters these days have a loose guideline or a recipe, but for us at Toby's, our recipes are quite set. And so I think the reason that recipes are exciting for us is because we're giving you the recipe and sort of providing some sort of security that the coffee is going to taste great if you put the coffee on that recipe. And so for us, it's about reverse engineering the process. So we provide the recipe and then we use that recipe as a fixed point, and then we work backwards to make sure that recipe always performs. So if it's not performing, we're going to make changes to our roasting to ensure that each recipe that we provide is performing the way that we expect it to perform. So sourcing coffee, so every roaster has to source coffee, and then it just becomes around how do you source it. So you can buy it from local importers that bring the coffee for you, or you can travel to the origin and you can buy it yourself, and that's called direct trade. And so for Toby's, it's extremely important for us that we have direct trade. So I think 75-80% of the coffee that we source ourselves. It requires a big team to be able to bring in this much, the amount of coffee that we bring in each year. And so for us, sourcing coffee is sort of as important as roasting the coffee. Like if you're a high quality chef, you want to know what ingredients you're bringing in. You don't get other people to bring them in, you bring them in yourself. Sourcing is where we travel to origin, we travel to different countries, we're searching for flavor profiles. And so each of our blends has a flavor profile, and when we travel, we're traveling to secure the flavor profiles to make sure our blends are consistent, not just year to year, but long term. Like if you have your coffee this week, and then in 6 weeks or whenever you have it, we want to make sure that flavor profile is the same, whether it's 1 week old, 2 weeks old, whether you bought the coffee in January and it's July, and you're buying coffees in different age range, or you're you really enjoyed the coffee when you come in 2021 and now you're back traveling and it's 2024, you want to make sure that you're having that same experience. And so when we travel to origin, this is why we travel, because just like any natural product, the flavor changes from year to year. The coffee is a tree. It's the fruit on a tree. And so depending on how that year was from, did it rain more? Was it too hot? Like, all these things contribute to how that coffee is going to taste every single year. And so we have to make sure that we're able to, with the ebbs and flows of the climate, that obviously that changes the flavor, but we need to be on top of those changes. And so our team each year travel to origin. They travel to the farms that we buy consistently, and we also visit new farms looking for new and exciting flavors as well. And so the process is that country will have a harvest period. We'll travel after the coffee's been harvested. We'll drink the coffee the producers or the farmers have provided for us. We'll drink the coffee with them. We'll score the coffee, and then we'll look to see if these coffees fit what we need for the upcoming year. And then so if we're happy with that, then we'll buy however much coffee we need. We're buying coffee from all over the world. So Central America, South America, Asia, Africa. And that's the most exciting thing about coffee, is you get to experience coffee not only from sort of just one part of the world, but at Toby's you experience coffee from the entire world. And so that's just sort of one part of coffee sourcing. And then the other part is single origins. And so you have blends and then you have single origins. So blends are the coffees that you drink when you drink your flat white and your cappuccino. These are the coffees that we think pair best with milk. And then we have single origins that are one part of a farm, and that we consider them to be the highest form of coffee drinking. You can taste the flavors, you can taste the unique sort of attributes that coffee has, and it's sort of set to that one particular farm. So when you go to a farm, it could be over hundreds of hectares or super small, over 1 hectare. And the single origin is just one part of each farm, whereas blends are coffees from around the entire farm. And usually it's like when we talk about single origins, we talk about single variety. And so the easiest way to sort of break that down is if you think about fruit or apples, you have green apples, you have red apples. And then so if you were to mix the trees, you might get orange apples. And so coffee is sort of similar, where your single origins, you're only looking for green apples, but the blend that you're drinking with your milk is a combination of all different types. And so because it's just one small sort of focused part of the farm, it gives you a unique and more desired flavor profile. And so we're also traveling because, like I said before, each country has a unique profile. And so some countries have more florals, more acidity, more fruit. And if you drink coffee from Africa, so Ethiopia, they're known to have really fruity, focused coffee. And then you come over to Asia, Sumatra. Sumatra's going to have a heavier, richer, nearly like spicy profile. And so you have these classic profiles from each country. And when we travel, we're looking for the best that each country has to offer. Central and South America are quite different. So Central America usually starts harvesting around January, February. And so we're traveling to Central America usually in April. So if we travel each year in April, and then we try to visit nearly every country in Central America. So we're doing Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala. And so we're trying to cover all these countries at once. And so you fly in and you do a couple days. Usually that trip will take around 1 month to do that, to do all those countries. Colombia is a unique country where they have 4 harvests throughout the year because of its location and the elevation and stuff like that in Colombia. Different parts of the country harvest at different times. And so Colombia is a unique country where it has 4 harvest periods. So we have the ability to get coffee from Colombia all year round without any troubles. Whereas Brazil harvests in June, July, and so we're usually traveling to Brazil around August, September. And so they're only going to have one harvest. And so we travel there, we need to buy coffee that's going to last us for the whole year. And same when we go to Central America, we need to buy coffee that's going to last us for the whole year. And so because all the countries harvest at different times, that's what allows us to keep the coffee fresh. Currently, we don't travel to Africa. We have a representative that lives in, I want to say Uganda, but she lives in one of the African countries. And so she works for us, and she travels to the regions and finds the coffee for us and handles all of the like samples. Because what happens is to buy the coffee, we need the samples, and so she'll go and source the samples for us. But she lives in Africa.